Hey everyone, imagine this. You've just finished your A-levels or polytechnic studies, looking forward to university when boom, you receive your enlistment letter. 2 years of your life committed to serving the nation. That's national service in Singapore. But what if you're not a Singaporean? What happens to foreigners who become permanent residents or whose children grew up here? And what happens if you try to avoid it? Today, we'll discuss Singapore's mandatory national service, its history, legal framework, and real-life cases of those who tried to evade it. Singapore didn't always have national service. In fact, in the 1950s and 60s, our country didn't even have a full-fledged army. Back then, we relied on the British military for defense. But in 1967, after Singapore separated from Malaysia, and with the British planning to withdraw their forces, then Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew and his team had a serious problem. How could Singapore defend itself with no natural resources, a small population, and surrounded by much larger neighbours? And so, the national service system was introduced under the Enlistment Act, requiring all able-bodied male citizens and second-generation permanent residents to serve. It wasn't just about building an army. It was about fostering unity, discipline, and resilience in a young nation. So what exactly does national service involve? Well, when a young Singaporean male turns 18, he's required to serve 2 years in one of 3 forces. The Singapore Armed Forces, also known as the SAF, where the majority serve as soldiers, the Singapore Civil Defence Force, training as firefighters or paramedics, or the Singapore Police Force, serving as police officers. But that's not the end. After completing full-time national service, they enter into the operational ready NS-man reservist phase, where they are called back for training up to 40 days per year until they turn the age of 40 or 50 for officers. Now, national service isn't just a duty. It's the law. The main legislation governing it is the Enlistment Act. Under this act, Section 4 requires all male Singapore citizens and second-generation PRs to register for NS. Section 33 sets penalties for failing to enlist, including fines or imprisonment. Section 33(1) covers defaulters, i.e. those who leave the country to avoid NS. The maximum penalty? Up to 3 years imprisonment and up to a $10,000 fine. But what about foreigners who become permanent residents or have children in Singapore? Here's where it gets interesting. First-generation PRs, i.e. adults who migrate to Singapore and become permanent residents, are not required to serve NS. However, second-generation PRs, that means children who become PRs, must serve NS, unless their family renounce their PR status before enlistment age. If they renounce their PR status to avoid NS, they may face difficulties in returning to Singapore, applying for PR again, or in getting certain long-term passes. National service is a cornerstone of Singapore's defense strategy, and evading it carries significant legal consequences. Let's explore some real-life cases where Singaporeans who left the country for long periods were charged upon their return to Singapore for evading NS. In 2023, Vin Lau Jun Sheng defaulted on his NS for over 10 years while living in Hong Kong. After his business failed, he returned to Singapore, fully aware of the consequences. He was sentenced to 6 months jail for evading NS. Basil Lim Boon Ho, who also held Malaysian citizenship, left for Malaysia as a child and defaulted on his NS obligations for nearly 10 years. He later returned and enlisted, but still faced legal action under the Enlistment Act. In another case, Zeli Cheng evaded NS for over 3 years, citing fears of injuries and negative stories he had heard. He was sentenced to 7 weeks jail upon returning to Singapore. These cases highlight that NS evasion carries severe consequences. As mentioned earlier, under Singapore law, defaulters face fines of up to $10,000 and imprisonment of up to 3 years or both. The message is clear. National service is a legal obligation that cannot be ignored. So, is national service a burden or a privilege? While some people complain about the disruption, others see it as an opportunity to serve, learn, and grow. From a legal perspective, it's clear. NS is not optional for eligible males, and avoiding it carries real consequences. For foreigners considering Singapore permanent residency, this is a crucial factor to keep in mind. Thanks for joining me in this discussion. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.